5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
This is About Space, America's return to space, with news and information on our U.S. space program.
From our About Space Today world headquarters on Florida's Space Coast, I'm John Gomez, and welcome to the final episode of This Week in Space. Today, we're going to look back on some of the top space stories from 2024. So sit back and relax as we recap this year in space.
D&D Cruise and Tours is the official agent for About Space, and we invite you to come fly away to all-inclusive resort island destinations, or a cruise vacation from Port Canaveral, and even visit the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex, or just come and see the parks. Call for a discount cruise or an island getaway or the Florida beaches. Call today. The call is free, and so are our services. Call 877-747-8631. That's 877-747-8631. We are Florida's group travel specialists.
Welcome back. You know, this year I've been fortunate enough to report on some of the biggest and most important space stories out there, and our first story is no exception. On January 8th, United Launch Alliance's Vulcan Centaur lifted off on its maiden flight from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, loaded with the Peregrine Lunar Lander.
The privately owned Peregrine Lunar Lander is headed back to Earth. The spacecraft is returning after its mission failed last week due to a propellant leak. On Saturday, the leak had slowed, but Astrobotic Technology says it expects the lander to burn up as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. The mission was to be the first time an American company sent a spacecraft to the moon, and the first time the U.S. returned to the lunar surface in more than 50 years.
The Vulcan Centaur launch was a success, but unfortunately, due to an issue with the lander's propulsion system, it never made it to the lunar surface. The decision was made to direct the spacecraft to burn up in Earth's atmosphere, which it did on January 18th, ending a massively disappointing mission. Our next story deals with SpaceX's Crew 8. In March, SpaceX launched Crew 8 to the ISS for an 8-month science mission. Well, that seems fairly normal in this day and age. It wasn't the mission that piqued the space community's interest. It was what happened after they returned to Earth in October. After the crew exited the spacecraft, they were taken into the ship's onboard medical treatment facility for evaluations. That's totally normal. After that checkup, NASA flew the crew members to Ascension Sacred Heart Hospital in Pensacola by helicopter for additional evaluation. One astronaut was hospitalized overnight, but NASA declined to provide the individual's condition or identity.
After an overnight stay at a Pensacola hospital, a NASA astronaut, part of the Crew 8 mission, was released this morning. Friday morning, the crew successfully splashed down off the coast, but were sent to the hospital. All were released on Friday except for one of them. NASA only said the astronaut was being held for a medical condition, but as of tonight, the astronaut returned to Johnson Space Center out in Houston.
While it's normal for astronauts to be seen by medical professionals after returning from space, this was a little more concerning, given that one crew member spent the night in the hospital. Will we ever know the identity of that crew member or why they were held overnight? Well, only time will tell. Moving forward in the year, on April 8th, a total solar eclipse moved across North America, passing over Mexico, the United States, and Canada. Here in the U.S., Austin, Dallas, Indianapolis, Cleveland, and Buffalo all experienced full totality. Astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson was as informative as he was excited.
What you're witnessing is the moon in its orbit around the Earth.
It's going to be coming more than 1,000 miles an hour.
Is it over already? Where is it? Did we miss it?
The size of the sunspot is about the size of Earth. This is humbling, yet enlightening. Here it comes. And this is going to happen fast. The total solar eclipse.
The Great North American Eclipse captivated people across North America. In one of the most incredible moments, the eclipse reached totality around 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time, less than 2 hours before the Cleveland Guardians were playing their home opener. Fans arrived early to catch the eclipse, and maybe even a foul ball. I guess you could call it a total eclipse of the park. Bonnie Tyler would be proud. Let's fast forward to June and the launch of Boeing Starliner. Astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams lifted off aboard a ULA Atlas V rocket bound for an 8-day mission on the ISS. Starliner was troubled from the very beginning, saddled with delays and cost overruns. Issues with things like the parachute harness and flammable tape on wiring were just two of the many issues the spacecraft faced. The most pressing issue, and the one that has kept Butch and Sonny in space, was a malfunction of the thrusters. While Boeing was confident that they could bring the astronauts home safely, NASA erred on the side of caution, and Starliner, now known as Calypso, returned to Earth on September 7th. Boeing officials were scheduled to participate in a post-landing news conference, but they abruptly canceled at the last minute without providing a reason. Butch and Sonny are still on the ISS. They were supposed to return in February, but on December 17th, NASA announced that they would be returning in late March, as SpaceX needs more time to finish a new Crew Dragon spacecraft. Let's talk a little about Europa Clipper. Back in January, we told you about NASA's Message in a Bottle campaign that invited people around the world to sign their names to a poem written by the U.S. Poet Laureate Ada Limon. That poem and the names of over 2.6 million people were stenciled onto a dime-sized silicone microchip aboard the spacecraft. On October 14th, About Space Today was on hand as NASA launched the Europa Clipper mission, the first mission to study Jupiter's moon, Europa. The mission will attempt to see if the ocean beneath the moon's crust can support life. Here's a bit more about the Europa Clipper mission.
The most exciting thing about Europa can be summarized in one word: water. Now think about all the water on Earth and double that. That's what we think is on Europa.
We need to go there to explore it, to understand, is this place a habitable environment that could potentially support life?
Getting close to Europa is a huge challenge. It sits in the worst possible radiation environment, trapped by Jupiter.
Europa is a moon of Jupiter about the size of Earth's moon, which has an icy surface that probably hides a subsurface ocean.
Scientists think Europa has the key ingredients to support life as we know it. Number 1, water. Number 2, energy. And 3, essential chemical building blocks. For the first time ever, we're sending a spacecraft completely dedicated to studying this moon.
The three main things that we're going to explore at Europa are the ice and the ocean, and understand that intersection between the two. Study the chemical composition of the moon, as well as the geology and whether it's active currently.
Europa Clipper is not specifically a life search mission. We're going to understand the potential habitability of Europa. The spacecraft has 9 instruments and a gravity science investigation. 5 of the instruments are called remote sensing instruments because they measure light reflected off Europa, like a camera or a spectrometer. The other 4 instruments are measuring the environment around them, like sniffing gases or dust.
Europa Clipper is the largest spacecraft NASA has ever built for a planetary mission.
It weighs 13,000 pounds, 6.5 tons. That's like the size of a huge African elephant.
And the solar arrays are massive. If you put the solar arrays at the toes of the Statue of Liberty, the other end of the arrays would come up to the Statue of Liberty's crown.
So not only are they big, these things are technological marvels. They are being bathed in radiation all the time, and they have to survive the entire mission like that.
Jupiter's radiation environment is intense, and Europa sits in the worst part of that environment.
Jupiter acts like a giant particle accelerator. There are charged particles trapped in Jupiter's magnetosphere that rotate with it. And these particles slam against Europa and will slam into our spacecraft as well.
We protect the spacecraft in 2 ways. Number 1, we try to minimize the amount of time we spend in there, which is why we are orbiting Jupiter and just flying by Europa. The second way we protect against the radiation is by having an electronics vault that we put our computer and some of the other sensitive electronics inside, which is made of about 1/3 of an inch of aluminum.
With each flyby of Europa, the outside surface of the spacecraft sees the equivalent of 1 million chest X-rays, just as we're flying by.
It's a pretty long trip to get to Jupiter from Earth, but not that bad from a planetary standpoint.
From launch to the time we get to Jupiter is about 5.5 years. And along the way, we have a flyby of Mars and then another flyby of Earth to get gravity assists to slingshot the spacecraft out to Jupiter.
I hope for the future explorers who are watching this at home that they take away from this that humanity, when we come together, can achieve really cool things.
This mission has been a long time coming, and we're so excited about what we're going to see when we get there.
We are in a golden age of robotic spaceflight exploration. How could you not be excited about something as monumental as this?
I am most excited about the potential to unlock the secrets of Europa, the potential to really understand this crazy world that exists and has likely existed in this condition for 4 billion years.
Europa Clipper should reach Jupiter orbit in April of 2030. Finally, I couldn't possibly put together a list of some of the year's biggest space stories without including Starship. It started in March with Starship's third test flight from Starbase in Boca Chica, Texas. Test Flight 4 took place just 3 months later on June 6th. But it was the spacecraft's fifth test launch on October 13th that captured everyone's attention. That was a test flight that saw the Super Heavy booster return to the launch site for a successful catch for the first time, leaving those watching in person and online absolutely stunned by what they saw. The reactions speak for themselves.
3, 2, 1. We have liftoff. Vehicles pitching downrange.
Raptor engines. Is one of the most gorgeous things I've ever seen in my entire life. Coming up on hot stage separation confirmed.
Booster coming in. See how fast this vehicle is moving on the left hand. Landing burn.
13 engines.
Micadilla has popped the booster.
At the launch tower.
What an incredible view!
Wow. I don't know about you, but we're losing our stuff up here.
Starship's sixth test flight was completed on November 19th, but sadly, no catch on that one. SpaceX anticipate the next test flight will take place on or about January 11th. Thank you so much for tuning in this year to This Week in Space. It's been the thrill of my life to be able to report on some of these big stories for you all this year, and I truly hope that you have enjoyed every minute of it as I have. Make sure you check out our Facebook page, aboutspace.today, for details on launches and landings. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. Just don't forget to click that like button. And if you really want to help us out, go to YouTube and click on subscribe. Coming in January, join David Denault for a special 4-part series on our return to the moon. Whether you're listening from the International Space Station or just on your phone here in the US, thanks for joining me. I'm John Gomez, and you just learned a little about space this year.